Um, Aisha is a biomedical engineer working across medical and pharmaceutical operations, developing adaptation frameworks for today's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous or VUCA environments. She's now a senior lecturer in quality assurance at Biograd and a sought-after speaker. And she's also founded the Sheba Sorority, a global network connecting professional Muslim women. And there's lots more detail, but I will hand over to Aisha now to give us a little bit of an overview as to her career and her path so far and how she's found her niche.
Thank you so much, Alia. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. Jazakallah khair, Syra, for the introduction and for the opportunity, alhamdulillah. Um, yeah, I'm Aisha Amili. I'm a biomedical engineer by training. I did a degree and a master's, both in biomedical engineering. My first was from I began it at the University, Queen Mary's University down in London. So I started my degree there. And then I moved midway to Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, Cork, and I finished off my degree in Cork from the Cork Institute of Technology, which has now been conglomerated into Munster Technological University, I think, or Munster Technical University. So, and I had really happy times there. It was a great place to learn and study. My first foray into my field had been in material science. So, at the Queen Mary's curriculum had been approaching biomedical engineering from the material science perspective. And then I moved to Ireland, and there the degree was more focused on how to be a biomedical engineer in the health service, and things like mechanical engineering and electrical engineering. So it was really great first degree. Um, then I had a gap of about 5 years. I'd married in this time, and I had two young children. I was also a trailing spouse. My husband, as a doctor, kind of on his bike every 6 months, moving around to different hospitals. So I kind of chose at that time to just kind of like do a strategic retreat with my career and just kind of, focus on my two young children. And so I did that for 5 years. And then in 2014, I got the chance to go into the world of work and use my studies. And I had a biomedical engineering degree, guys. I thought, what am I going to do with this? And I just thought it was automatic. If you have a biomedical engineering degree, you should go and work as a medical engineer. And that's what I did. So I applied and got a job as an assistant medical engineer in the NHS at a hospital in Liverpool. So I live in Liverpool now. And I did that, and it was great. It was my first foray into into the graduate world of work, and it was really important for my development. I got to work with the products themselves, and I was working on maintenance, calibration, repairing of medical equipment, but also I was working, seeing the equipment I was working on at the bedside of patients. And that was really important because I really got to see that trajectory from the work I do as a medical engineer straight to the patient, and how they use the equipment and how crucial it is to them. After 2.5 years there, I decided to go and do a master's. So I went back into university, and I studied biomedical engineering as a master's. That was at the University of Liverpool. And then after that, I went into the private sector. My first job was at AstraZeneca. I worked as a process operator. So it seemed unusual to, my previous colleagues and other people around me. It was going, well, you've got an engineering degree and now you're going into manufacturing. But to be honest, the same skills that I had used in my previous job in the NHS, I was still using. It was a big change, guys. I went from working a 9 to 5 in a hospital to now working 12-hour shifts, 4 on, 4 off, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And it was really grueling. At the same time, I also had three young children at home, aged 2 to 10. And my husband also had a very demanding career. So our household had many moving parts. And, I was doing a lot of juggling in that time. But, whereas my first job had been working at the bedside, working on medical equipment, I got to now see how a product is made. So working in production, working in manufacturing, it gave me a really great insight into the importance of precision in manufacturing, the importance of validation. The pharma industry, just like other heavily regulated industries, has a lot of technical, complex operations, and I really felt like I came alive in that role. It was really brilliant, and for somebody who has an engineering background, it was a perfect soog into that industry. From after just over 2 years as a process operator in manufacturing, I then got a chance to go into quality assurance, working there as an operations specialist. So from working on the product in my first job as an assistant medical engineer, and then now working in production. My next job in quality assurance, I started to work not just focusing on the product itself, but now kind of zooming out a bit and now looking at the whole holistic manufacturing site. So not just focusing on manufacturing, but also engineering, quality control, supply chain. And it was a brilliant insight. And I was just kind of like getting more experience along that value chain. Quality assurance, my parents were baffled. They kind of were thinking, okay, if you're an engineer and you have a biomedical engineering degree, you should be focusing just on engineering. What's all this, moving around? But for me, I felt like it was very clear trajectory, and I really enjoyed quality assurance. I was really fascinated with good manufacturing practice. I really enjoyed looking at quality risk management. I really was using my engineering skills in considering issues like quality by design, and also, how to turn quality into a competitive advantage for a company. So I never saw it as anything but, just kind of, this is what I'm doing with my degree. I'm still using it, but, I'm just expanding what I can do. In my second year in that quality assurance role, I got a chance to go into regulatory affairs. And so that again was another zooming out. And instead of like where quality assurance was looking at the full site operations, regulatory affairs was now looking at, looking at it at an industry level and a global level. I worked in research and development, and it was fascinating. How does, the law and business and science come together to, create high quality medicines and then get them approved, get them licensed? That was a really great foray for me. And in the end, I decided like this is, really where I want to stay. Each time moving from medical engineering into manufacturing, into quality assurance, into regulatory affairs, I was building up my skills, guys. I was actually following something that I had seen the most successful C-suite executives at my company do. So, as you do, I would look at their work profiles and consider, how did they get to where they are? How did they get into the boardroom? And sometimes I would see this pattern of working, 2 years, 3 years in each function. And that is to kind of give that really good general knowledge of the entire value chain. And so that's kind of what I resolved to do. I thought, right, I'm going to do the same thing. Then earlier this year, I got a really great chance to leave AstraZeneca, and where I'd been there for 6.5 years, I got to go into Biograd, where I'm now senior lecturer in quality assurance. And in this role, I train and upskill frontline and boardroom staff on quality assurance and manufacturing. I talk to them about topics like quality risk management, about deviations, validation, and I use all my skills gained from my previous 4 roles in kind of designing and delivering workshops that can kind of really break down complex operations and technical knowledge into easy, bite-sized, information that workers can take in, staff can utilize, and also upskill and future-proof themselves with. Thank you, Ollie.
Amazing. Thank you for that really nice overview of a really varied career. Um, and throughout all of this, because you've gone from NHS into private sector too, with from different, from nine, like you say, 9 to 5 to really long hours and balancing that family life. And how have you felt that your career interfaces with your faith and being Muslim?
Um, at the first thing I would say is that our faith really gives us a very good grounding. So by temperament and inclination, I really like operations. So I like being on the front line. I like firefighting. I like being in that space of, thinking on my feet and working to, different kind of complex problems and looking for, different like interactions and how to bring things together. So alongside that, having faith, helps me to kind of, deal with stress and, prayer, alhamdulillah, and, our religion, it's a really good, source of direction. It's a compass for us as well as like an anchor. And so in the flux of, working on the front line, in pharmaceutical operations, getting to kind of like ground myself, with prayer and getting to, you know, um, just to, remember the bigger picture, alhamdulillah. That kind of how my faith interfaced with my work. Another thing I think as well is that for a lot of us who keep Islam as a faith when we grow up, I think that I quite like working in a heavily regulated environment. I like the stricture, I like the structure, I like compliance. That really interests me. So some people would be bored stiff working in that kind of arena, but I think for me, just as in my personal life, it's something that I also look for in my professional life as well. So yeah, that's how I would answer that question, Alia.
Amazing. And have you faced any challenge? I'm sure you have faced any challenges along the way. And I think I'm thinking, especially as a woman in engineering, a woman of faith in engineering, how has that been?
You know what? Alhamdulillah, shukrullah. I've always, each of those jobs I got, I went in as a, hijab wearing Muslim woman, a black Muslim woman, and I've always had great managers, really supportive. So in that respect, alhamdulillah, I haven't, struggled. I would say perhaps juggling working full time with family and children, that can be, but I've got a very good support network around me as well, alhamdulillah. But I think what I would say about challenges is really that, whereas for me, I really went in, kind of this 2 years, 2 years, 2 years, 2 years in each role as kind of like a strategy and a plan. What I also found is that careers in general just don't follow the same track as they did when we were younger or what we were told. So, the normal typical advice was always study hard at school, get good grades, go to university, do like the immigrant parent dream, medicine, engineering, law, be a teacher, something like that will lead, straight into a profession, accountancy. Okay. And then the advice was, and then you'll graduate. And then after you graduate, you'll go straight into a job, and then after that, you just kind of work your way up. If you're an accountant, you move from, you move up as an accountant each time, building up seniority, even if you kind of change firms. Or if you're an engineer, you kind of stay as an engineer and you just kind of move around and build up your seniority. And this was seen as seamless. It was seen as automatic, and this would see you through all the way till retirement. Okay, and that worked for the baby boomers. It worked for the Gen Xers for a long time. I think, for my generation, us millennials, it kind of started to wobble a bit, okay? Um, but, definitely now for, your generation coming up, the career landscape is very different, and the advice we have to give you is very different as well. And not only to young Gen Z, um, graduates and early careers professionals, even to, the other people in the job market right now. And the real reason for this challenge is because of the age that we're living in, VUCA. So VUCA is an acronym. V stands for volatility, U stands for uncertainty, C stands for complexity, and A stands for ambiguity. And it was a term coined by the American military in the 1980s to describe a situation, okay? But now policyholders and business strategy leaders, they use VUCA to actually describe the age that we're in, okay? So the times. So you might not have heard of VUCA, guys. Maybe you might have heard this world we're in right now described as turbulent or described as unprecedented. But all these terms are to do with describing how, the pace of change that we're seeing, especially since like 2020 started, really, has been very fast. And there are lots of reasons for that. So going back to VUCA, so the V in VUCA is for volatility. That is really referring to the fact that change happens very fast and in unpredictable directions. Okay, so that's about volatility. Uncertainty is about the fact that even if we try and control all the factors that we know are of, we still can't predict the outcome of plans or strategy because of the external factors that we can't control or that can come up at any time. The C in VUCA is about complexity, and that's about the interrelationships and the web of networks and chains that are connected, and and how something that happens in one system can affect several others very fast, very quickly. And the A in VUCA is about ambiguity. Things are more unclear. People don't know where they stand. That could be to do with political situations or in work. Now, the reason VUCA is happening is lots of reasons. Okay, so as we see, just watching the news every day, there are things like supply chain risks. Okay, China right now putting like tariffs and blocking rare earth minerals, selling to the rest of the world. Okay, there are geopolitics. Okay, so geopolitics is a big thing in the Middle East, in Europe. Things like sanctions are happening that affects business, that affects, things like the budget, that we had today. That's, our chancellor, she's put a budget out, but we don't know what, things are going to happen in the news. Tariffs, the rise of populist movements like MAGA, Brexit, reform. There are so many different elements and factors that can that create that VUCA environment, and so businesses are really affected by this. Okay, so businesses are trying to operate, and previously, they would work to like 3 to 5 year plans, but because of VUCA, now businesses are sometimes working quarter to quarter, so they're not being able to plan far ahead. How does that affect the job market? It means sometimes companies are afraid to kind of hire, or if they're hiring, they're more risk averse. Okay, they're wanting more qualities in candidates. It can also mean that there are more frequent layoffs as well and redundancies. It can also mean lack of investment because of VUCA. What if you don't know where politics is going, where the wind is blowing, and so how do you plan multi-billion pound investments in this kind of economic and political landscape? And all of those things kind of can make the work search difficult and challenging. So that's VUCA. That affects everyone. Gen Z, Gen X, the boomers, that affects everybody. Then as Muslim women, we also are dealing with our own intersections. So Sheba sorority, which I set up back in January 2023, we often talk about the triple intersection. That is the link between being female, being, most of us are of BAME background, and also being Muslim, and how sometimes those three things can interact, in like, sometimes in a negative way. I don't know if you would have heard this, but it's often said, if you have these three intersections, it's kind of like a big disadvantage in life, and you'll have to work three times harder because you've got three times more to prove. And that triple intersection, that triple jeopardy, can also kind of create our own VUCA situations. So when it comes to volatility, guys, you might be preparing for a presentation, you might be getting your pitch ready, you're pitching to a new customer, or you're kind of like presenting your project, and then something happens in the news. A politician makes a comment about Muslims, or some kind of political thing happens, and then that kind of sets a pall on your that can set a pall on your day. It can kind of change risk as well. When the volatility in geopolitics, volatility in in the rise of like populism, that can affect how Muslim women are, our safety, and how we are, interacting and going about our business as well. So that's the volatility side. Okay, so the speed of change and can come at us from different directions. Then uncertainty. So, sometimes in some work situations, you don't know there's a bias there unless there's a trigger. And so sometimes it could be a woman who doesn't wear a hijab suddenly wears a hijab, and then her bosses find that really strange, and suddenly there's a bias there that it hadn't been clear before. Or somebody could be rubbing along quite nicely at work, fine, and then they ask for a prayer room, and then the uncertainty of how will your manager react, or how will your department react, uncertainty as well about what will different teams think. Sometimes companies have different policies, or different ways of dealing with these requests. And so that creates an uncertainty in our lives, as well as practicing Muslims. Then see the complexity. So when you kind of bring together being a woman, and gender is like a big cause of like sometimes inequality. And then you bring in being, Black or Asian or Arab, right? Being from an ethnic minority. And then you also add in Islam. It's not like 1+1+1=3. Sometimes the three of them can interact in quite like, kind of like a multiplier effect. Okay, so that complexity, that can also be a big challenge. And then the A for ambiguity. Sometimes as well, we don't know, as when it comes to like rules around what is professional wear, or what is what is like cultural fit. What does that mean? When we're talking about being a good cultural fit into an organization, the ambiguity around those things. That's how VUCA, kind of translates into our own lives as Muslim women, and Muslim men as well. They're affected by much of the same things. So that's kind of what I would say about challenges. In terms of the Sheba sorority, we talk about turning the triple jeopardy to triple triumph. So it's about leveraging and actually looking at these three factors and turning them into our unfair advantages. And that, we are not just talking about surviving this, and we're not just talking about, okay, just keeping our heads down and just getting on and doing the work. But, the women in Sheba, we're all very ambitious. We're all very involved in our careers. And so for us, this is just something that we kind of want to thrive and lead. Our careers are something that are really important to us, and kind of setting up this network, just kind of creating like a safe, intimate space to be able to develop together and build together. So there are lots of ways we can deal with the challenges of VUCA. both like on the economic and business front, and then also as how we deal with VUCA in our own lives as Muslims. So yeah, that's kind of, but alhamdulillah, in terms of myself, I know a lot of experiences of different sisters. But like I said, alhamdulillah, in my three jobs, I've always had really great understanding managers, mashallah, and I've always had really great colleagues. I've lived a very charmed life that way, alhamdulillah, but I'm very aware of, the challenges other sisters and brothers can face. And so, yeah, trying like a lot of times I like to speak on VUCA and talk to Muslims about how we see these and how we reframe them into things that we can kind of navigate and even excel in.
Can you give us like maybe a few tips or advice of how we could navigate these situations? And it's brilliant how you've like contextualized VUCA in both a macro way and also in our own lives. Um, yeah.
Sure. So one thing I would say is that oftentimes, when it comes to when they're talking about upskilling in for this, and future proofing, oftentimes people will talk about like, oh, learn AI, that's going to help you, that's going to future proof your career. But actually, whilst technical knowledge is really, really important, guys, having that book knowledge, having those certifications, having that degree, that domain knowledge is really important. I would say that it's actually the soft skills, and they shouldn't be called soft, rather, they're like the power skills that are really important in navigating VUCA. And the reasons why are many, but so I'll just go through a few of them. So VUCA, remember, it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity.
It's saying I'm sharing my location with him, but it's not showing.
Sure. And so what the importance of that is that you need to have in this time a lot of resilience, you need to have grit, and you need to be really adaptable. Okay. When, change can happen, very quickly and in different directions, you need to be somebody who can, kind of, if not meet it with equanimity, then at least be, sanguine or calm through it. Okay. You want to be able to handle change. You don't want to, inshallah, even be able to kind of embrace change. Okay. Those are qualities that are really important for employers to see. You want to be able to showcase that, hey, I'm somebody who is very adaptable. I'm very agile in my thinking. These qualities are important because they show employers that, right, if you're somebody who has that kind of like attitude and approach to change and resilience, that's very important as well. Like, you're on a plan, but something happens, and then now, right, the funding's been pulled. Okay, or head office says we're not going ahead with this product anymore. We've got to change over. You've got to be able to kind of take it take it in and then just kind of reorientate. And that's a really important skill during VUCA. Can you reorientate, relearn, and then redeploy? That's a really attractive quality in a worker. Another thing is having entrepreneurship. Oftentimes we talk about entrepreneurship, okay? And that's for the person who wants to set up a business outside, and set up their own business. But entrepreneurship is also a really important skill to have. And that's important whether you're in the private sector, guys, or the public sector, or the third sector. Okay, having that business acumen, being able to kind of look for business opportunities or ways for your company or your firm or your organization to kind of make more money, or be able to increase the bottom line in some way. That's a really important skill to have and to showcase. Makes you more valuable, more indispensable to your to wherever you work. Even if you're an engineer, even if you're a lawyer, even if you're like a bench scientist, entrepreneurship and business acumen are really, really important skills. Another thing I would say is teamwork. So during VUCA, you can be like change direction, okay, and teams are made in a day, and then another week later you can be put on another team with brand new people. Can you work with people without friction? Do you have good social skills? Are you a good team player? the important thing is about, when change is happening quickly and companies have to pivot quickly, they want employees and they want staff who are able to, kind of move with them and be agile in their thinking and also agile in their professionalism as well. So, in the pharma industry, there are like two main pressures. So, on one hand, there's the need to constantly kind of innovate and to evolve, okay, because changing consumer demands, changing technology. So they need to kind of, on one hand, innovate quickly, take risks and, think on the spot. But on the other hand, there's also an opposite pressure, which is that regulations are tightening on the industry, okay? And so in that respect, companies then have to be more risk averse. They have to be more compliant conscious, okay? So how do you manage that? How do you balance those two competing pressures? One, to innovate and kind of keep up with consumer demand, keep up with market demand and market changes, and then also with government changes or pressure group changes, regulatory and compliance pressures tightening, increasing. How do you manage those two? So, employees and, being able to show that you're somebody who can understand those different realms and be able to, be a team player and really kind of stand out. Those are really important qualities to have.
That's amazing. Thank you. Yeah, I've definitely found in work that as long as you can take one for the team sometimes and yeah, work with people, I think people really value that. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to open up for questions. Feel free to put your mic on and ask a question or put your hand up. Or also put questions in the chat as well. Feel free. My last question was, whilst we wait for people to think up of questions or put them in the chat, was if you had any advice for your younger self, would you do anything differently? What would be the one thing you'd tell your younger self?
So, what I would say to my younger self is that where, you know, now I'm at the grand old age of 41, alhamdulillah, I realize, in the last couple of years, the importance of exposure and experience. So when I was younger, my focus was a lot on education. So getting the grades, getting the certificates, getting the, qualifications. So if I could go back to my younger self, I would really try and talk to that younger Aisha and say, listen, you've got to, you know, network. That's really something I've only gotten into like in the last 3 or 4 years. I would have liked to, have done that a lot earlier because I've seen, mashallah, the effect of, kind of increasing my circles, getting exposure to different types of professionals, different from different companies, the importance of, having that contact with people of different levels of seniority. And, something I like to encourage young people now to do is, do things like join boards, join, professional associations in your industry. At the very least, you'll get like insights, insider insights. But they actually, exposure, which is, if you know about the 3 E's framework, education, exposure, and experience, having that networking with senior people in your profession or people of different professions, that can kind of possibly lead to mentorship opportunities, guys, or that can lead to, somebody could give you a heads up, hey, there's a job coming up, something that's not been put up on any job board yet. So that can help. Also things like they can introduce you to somebody who can kind of help your career, or they could vouch for you. So, especially from those of us coming from immigrant backgrounds, we're constantly always like kind of focusing on education part, like getting certifications, getting more qualifications, mashallah, and that is really important. But what I would tell my younger self is give as much importance to networking and building my circles of influence. And also, yeah, the importance of experience too, inshallah.
Wow, thank you. We've got a question in the chat from Hira who says, Jazakallah for sharing these really interesting insights. If there's only one action people do after today's talk, what would you recommend they do?
So, whether you guys are working or not working, something I would really encourage is um, so I'll say something that really helped me was joining Toastmasters last year. Okay, so Toastmasters is a great organization. It's all about helping people with public speaking, leadership skills, guys, and confidence. Um, my local Toastmasters, Liverpool City Toastmasters, it's a great group, mashallah, very diverse, people from all over, and it's a great environment to kind of build up your like growth mindset, build up your professional skills, and also get really good personal development. Why am I recommending this? Because those skills will help you when it comes to interviews, guys. Those skills will help you when it comes to being able to talk. Like the conversation, sometimes you might meet somebody at the water cooler at work or while you're waiting for the kettle to boil. Just skills of being able to kind of like have a back and forth. Those are really important. And so, there's one element of Toastmasters which is called table topics, and that's like rapid fire questions that, so it helps you kind of think on your feet, but in a really safe space. It also incorporates a lot of evaluations as well. And, mashallah, if nothing else, it gets you used to good stress. So good stress is really important. The more we're exposed to good stress, when it comes to Toastmasters, it's about, speaking every week in front of people that you don't know, then it kind of completely reduces the worry of public speaking, which many people have. And that can also reduce as well, like nervousness or confidence issues when it comes to interviewing or, when it comes to like kind of pitching yourself, inshallah. So if there's one thing I'd say, look up, your local Toastmasters and join that, inshallah, guys.
Amazing, thank you. Before I go on to the other question in the chat, is there anyone wanting to ask a question on the mic? Nope. Okay, if you do, just put your hand up.
Alia, can I just?
Yep. Okay, yeah, sure.
Thank you. It was just on. I just think it might be something that a lot of you want to ask. Jazakallah, okay, that was brilliant. Aisha, could you just reflect on, some people may get a little bit of anxiety, with the networking and the mixing. Sometimes the environment of that can cause a little bit of stress. I was wondering if you could just reflect on that. That can sometimes make people a little bit reticent to want to go if it's in the local pub or there's a lot of drinking. What advice would you give, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the really big differences between people who come from like like minority backgrounds, okay, is that we don't have those networks that people who kind of come from like middle class backgrounds will have. Okay, if you like the networks of living in a particular area. So I didn't grow up in a great area. So the networks of like going to a particular school, going to a particular university, kind of having those connections, those are things that can really help people like throughout their lives. So as Muslims, how do we, when a lot of us, not all of us, mashallah, some people come from very like well-off backgrounds, but how do people who come from backgrounds where there's not like that kind of those types of professions or those types of circles of influence, how do we network? Okay, the first thing I would say is that turning, as I mentioned before about the Sheba sorority, so that's like a Muslim female only network. Okay, and what we did was, what we found that when we pooled our social and career capital, we all kind of, it kind of had like a multiplier effect for all of us. Okay, and that means that once you are, so if you feel like nervous about starting like networking, like a mixed networking or networking with like people that you don't know completely, I'd say, start your own network or kind of like join together with Muslims. What we found with Sheba is that over time, we then, because we kind of made these connections and friendships, we started then to attend other networking events together. Okay, so where one of us would feel like awkward or strange to go along, then we'd say, okay, well, hey, how about we go together? And then that kind of helped soften it as well, mashallah. But I would say, for me, starting networking doesn't just have to be like with people. You can just start like small. You can start it in your area, start it in your neighborhood, and then just kind of like build up that muscle. And then kind of move towards that. But yes, I've been to networking events where people drink. Yep, and I've been to networking events where people, but alhamdulillah, the hijab is kind of like its own force field, right? um, and I've gone along with other Shiva members, and that's kind of really helped the nervousness and how will I fit in, and how can I how can I kind of talk to people that I don't know, and in different types of places outside of work. That's where something like Toastmasters can really help, okay, because it's like a safe environment to build up those skills. But yeah, inshallah, I hope that's a good answer.
Thank you. I've got another question in the chat. Um, you mentioned finding a career role that is suited to your nature or temperament. How important is this in the context of VUCA, and how does one go about finding a career role that is suitable to their temperament?
Okay, so I mentioned myself. So I like fast-paced environments. Okay, I like very dynamic environments. I like working where there's a lot of thinking on your feet and really reaction. Okay, so that's kind of where I feel best placed. But for somebody who doesn't have that kind of inclination, that might be like a nightmare for them. They don't want to work in that type of space. Okay, so when I speak about your temperament, it's not really I just kind of use that term, but really it's about working somewhere where you feel just like if you're somebody really suited to like kind of research and development, or like the public sector. Some people are really like, really passionate about working in NGOs. I quite like working in the corporate sphere. I quite like working in the private sector. I think that it's quite a good area to go to if you're a woman, especially if you're a young woman hoping to kind of like develop in your career. A lot of like big corporations, big pharma, they have a lot of like programs where they develop people. They're really great with giving people opportunities, giving people like secondments and opportunities for like leadership. So I think, I always recommend people to kind of like try and go into industry if they can. But when it comes to, because VUCA is all about that, yes, you remember volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Rather, it can sound like it's like, oh my God, this sounds like chaos, but actually, it's not about turbulence as much as it's about, it can be about disruption and opportunity. And so, kind of training our eye and reframing the way we look at VUCA and look at the industries we're trying to go into. And how do we kind of orientate ourselves, and maneuver into the right positions to kind of make that entry or make that progression as well. That's very important, inshallah. Hope I've answered that.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks. Is there another question from the floor? I'm going to call it the digital floor before I go back to the chat.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Jazakallah khair, Aisha, for all your insights. I love the way you explained, the part about the pressure to innovate quickly while still, staying compliant. because it feels so relevant to sectors like the private sector. And I'm curious, when those pressures kind of collide, what do you think that early career professionals usually get wrong, and what someone in the early stage of their career should do differently right from the start?
MashaAllah. So Skills England, they published a report earlier this year, and what they did was they talked to life sciences employers about what kind of skills do they think are really important in future workforce. And a really important part, as well as like technological awareness and digital skills, was having regulatory and quality assurance knowledge. Okay, so what I would recommend is, even if you're not going directly into quality assurance or regulatory affairs, having that knowledge is such an important and fundamental base to going into the pharmaceutical industry, or actually any heavily regulated industry. Okay, people always kind of think it's like about AI adoption and technology, and it's actually about the company's best asset and the best technology companies have is their people, right? And so showing that willingness to be to upskill yourself and to kind of not just learn only your function or only your process or only your task or project, but showing that willingness and that ability to take in complex information and be able to kind of also communicate that. That's a really important skill if you're wanting to go into the industry, being able to showcase that, inshallah.
Thank you so much.
Amazing. We have another question in the chat. Do you have a good piece of advice for new immigrants and how they can get into the field, especially having a 2 years gap?
Yeah, mashallah. So I spoke about, when you asked me what would I tell my younger self, I spoke about the importance of exposure and experience. These are just as important as education. So I had a 5 year gap. So I finished my degree and then I took 5 years out to raise my two older children before I went into the world of work. So at that point, I kind of went in entry level medical engineer at a hospital in Liverpool. So from that, I was then able to kind of, after that, I then moved into the private sector. Exposure would have really helped in terms of being able to know what options there are with your studies or with your degree. At this stage, something you can do right now is look up some podcasts to do with your industry, okay, and start kind of listening to them. That can kind of give you insider knowledge from professionals and from people who are more senior, more experienced. So for me, there's a really good podcast I listen to on Spotify where they invite people, QA directors, to talk about their experience, and I learn a lot from that. One time I listened to one podcast episode on the way to work, and then I met somebody at this new place I was working who actually knew the director who had been interviewed in that podcast. And so there was like an instant connection there. So minimum, listen to podcasts. If you can, get into some professional associations. So that can help with your networking, that can give you exposure, that can also kind of point you in different directions or possibilities, things you might not consider. Experience. So I haven't said much about experience. Something really important is to be able to have, whatever your hobbies are, whatever your passions are, kind of really, see them as helping you build up transferable skills that you can then take into the world of work. Okay, so if you're not working, or if you're a new immigrant, you don't have like that kind of like job history, don't worry about that. Try and find something that you're interested in. You don't have to fake your interest, but try and find something like some volunteering project in your local area and give time to that. Build up your soft skills, communication skills, leadership skills, influencing skills, and that can help you then. So what I'll mention is, so before I started my job, I actually volunteered for the Institute of Physics. I worked for something called the Lab in a Lorry scheme. And I did that for some time, and it was a really great program. And after kind of being out of work for a while, that helped me kind of like get back into, although it was just like teaching young children about, physics and how cool physics is, but it helped me with science communication, science for public understanding. And that helped me as well with, later on when I started applying for jobs. So education is important, exposure is important, and experience is important. Experience doesn't just have to be in a 9-to-5 job. Experience can be from volunteering. It can be from being involved in charity work. It can be being involved in organizations. Look for professional associations, podcasts, things like that, inshallah.
Amazing. I'm going to take this opportunity to plug ISB, just because the volunteering and my work with ISB has been so invaluable in what you say, like the soft skills. My public speaking and organizing and working with other people has helped me so much in my job as well. So, if you guys want to learn more about ISB, please do get in touch. Also, we're always looking for more helpers. So, that's just a selfish little plug from me. I think we probably have time for one more question. If it's quick. There's one in the chat, so I'll do this. From your experience from moving from role to role, so like engineering to quality assurance to regulatory affairs, how can we start to learn about a completely different field? And I think you've maybe touched on this a little bit, but how have you sort of jumped through to different fields like that?
Yeah. So, when we talked about career advice in the past, it would be really about specialization, right? And kind of stick to one path, specialize early, and kind of move up in that. Okay. But actually, a lot of like boardroom leaders now, executive leaders, what they show is like really having like general understanding of business. And so you'll find people will have like, 3 years in supply chain, 2 years in quality assurance, 2 years in manufacturing, and they'll build up their knowledge of the whole ecosystem of their industry, and use that as to kind of get into kind of the C-suite. And it's really important because of VUCA, complexity, ambiguity, uncertainty, volatility. These are, being able to have that general knowledge gives you that ability to kind of strategize, because you have more things to call upon. And also when you're, when you're the kind of like leadership skills, because I'm not talking to you about just how to get your foot in the door. I don't want to just talk to you about that. Inshallah, you guys, you're going to go in and you're going to like dominate. We want you to kind of like do really well in your careers, rise up, be the top of your profession, mashallah. We want you to do really well. We're not just talking about surviving anymore. We really want to thrive and really want to and win. So I want you guys to, as soon as you start that first job, start thinking, so this is what I would do, start thinking about the next role you want, okay? Even if it's like 2 or 3 years, have a plan, make a plan for yourself, okay? So, so as you said, so how can we start to learn about a completely different field? So if you're thinking like this, if you're thinking, right, I've got my first job, I've got my foot in the door, I'm going to learn, okay? When I would move from role to role, it wasn't because I was the cleverest by any means at all, nor was it because I was especially ambitious, but I just was more impatient than most people probably. I had 3 young children at home, and so when I would go into a role, I would be like really focused on, this is what I need to do, this is what I need to get, and I'm just going to like, get everything I need out of this and then move on to the next. Okay. So from the first time you're starting, you want to learn your job and do it well, do it with ihsan, do it with excellence. Okay. MashaAllah. No matter what job you're doing, you have to do that to the best of your ability, and also, with excellence, with that high standard that Islam requires of us in all our dealings, okay, worldly and for the next life. As well as that, though, you've got to like have like a split screen, one for what you're doing right now and one for where you want to go. I know that does take time. And I know that, like, of course, building time to like network, building time to volunteer, building time to kind of learn and skill, like horizon scan and attend lectures and talks and things like that. That takes time, right? But you've got to kind of prioritize that. You've got to build that into your, plan when you're thinking about moving ahead in work, inshallah.
Brilliant, so much. I will wrap that up there. Jazakallah khair for your amazing words, Aisha. That I think we've all got something really valuable out of this, both practical tips as well as just nuggets of wisdom. I know I'll be taking away a lot of this stuff. So thank you so much for your time.